everybody. Thank you for joining us here at WCCA TV, and welcome back for episode 61 of Tech Safe. My name is Cece Doucette, and I am the Director of Massachusetts for Safe Technology, as well as the Education Services Director for an international nonprofit called Safer Screen Time, where we have a course that you can complete online in about an hour, like on your lunch hour, to really get a thorough understanding of what this wireless radiation issue is, the impact that technology in general is having on our children every day, and what we can do about it today to stay connected and protected. I'd like to give a shout out to our wonderful producer, Adam Rice, here in the studio with us. Thank you, Adam. And today I have, of late, been opening up my segments with a little bit of the science, because we just don't get that information in the mainstream media because of conflicts of interest with the industries that promote these technologies. So rather than talking about a particular paper today, I am so honored to introduce our guest, one of the world's leading scientists from France, Dr. Annie Sasco, who spent a large portion of her career working with the World Health Organization. And even though she is now technically retired, she has not stopped contributing to our world in a way that will hopefully help to protect us and especially our children. So Dr. Sasco, thank you so much for joining us from France.
Thank you for inviting me. It's really an honor to be on your show.
Well, the honor is all mine. So Dr. Sasco, if you would be so kind as to introduce yourself and your background in this field.
So I'm a medical doctor. I graduated in France. I had clinical training mainly in gynecology and obstetrics, as well as in psychiatry. And I love the contact with a patient because it really makes a doctor feel useful when you have someone who's sick and then that person is no longer sick. But on the other hand, I also at the same time wanted to have a broader action at the level of populations, maybe for philosophical or political reasons. So I wanted to do public health. Even if I don't like the name, I prefer to call it population health because it's acting at the level of population. I don't know what's public, what's private in that sense. So at that time in France, I could not get a very good training. I tried. I did preventive medicine, occupational medicine, and sociology, some informatics, but I was not satisfied with it. I decided to come to the US. And given I've never put a foot in the US, the only name I knew was Harvard, so I decided to apply to Harvard. Unfortunately, I was admitted. I had even taken the exam called at that time PCFMG, which would have allowed me to practice medicine in the US. But never got the business. So in any event, I came to Harvard, and those were my very best years in my life, where I felt I learned many things, but also at the same time, I felt empowered, capable of doing things for others in terms of care, but also in terms of research and teaching. So I did a Master of Public Health and followed by a Master of Science in Biostats and Epidemiology, and then finally a Doctor of Public Health in Epidemiology, Biostatistics, and Evaluation Behavioral Sciences. So there I was teaching. I was officially a fellow of Harvard University, and really I got the training, the education I wanted to act on a larger scale. Then I returned to France, and I had the opportunity of working for 22 years at the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is the cancer specialized agency of the World Health Organization. So I could do studies on many different cancers on a world scale, or at least in different countries. It's not enough to count dead bodies. And in fact, I've never been happy in a study to say, one case. Yes, of course, it will improve the statistical precision of the study, but it means one more suffering, one more death. And I want the numbers we are collecting to be used for then trying to find the cause. Why do some people get cancer and others not? And that's what I have been doing all my life long now, because first at IARC, and then I had to leave IARC. I had to come back to Bordeaux, in fact, to take care of my mother with Alzheimer. So I continued there within the French NIH, which is called the INSERM, to have also there a group doing epidemiology for cancer prevention. As you said, I have been officially retired, compulsory retirement. Such a thing exists in France. I didn't want to stop, so I'm retired. I'm no longer being paid, but I want to continue because I think there are some problems, and EMF is really one of them, which deserve to be further studied, evaluated, and acted upon.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing your incredible background and for all that you've done for your patients and for humanity on a larger scale. We're very fortunate to have our scientists at the World Health Organization level who are still able to do this kind of research. I know that the ICBE-EMF, the International Commission for the Biological Effects of EMFs, just shared with the world a new study that came out that was partially funded by the World Health Organization, where they actually looked at the gathering science on this issue and determined high certainty that yes, radio frequency radiation does cause cancer. So if we didn't have scientists like yourself and others at that level, how would anybody ever know? Which top studies do you find to be particularly important, and why?
There were studies done in the USSR, as was the name at the time, on people working with radar for military or civil purposes. And the Russians were the first one to describe what is nowadays known as the EMR syndrome. All this collection of miscellaneous symptoms from headache, nausea, pain, tinnitus, heart irregularities, etc., a number of things. They described it in Russian in the 50s. And of course, no one heard about it, but yet the American army found out about it, and they also did study on their radar stuff, and they also noticed there were problems. But this was not at all just in the general. We had to wait for these EMFs to get into the homes of people to worry a little more about it. And the introduction was through the microwave oven, because then people found out that these were electromagnetic fields, and yes, really, it heats food. So, and if you don't know the process, it will burn food. Mm-hmm. So it has an impact. And I remember at that time, I bought a microwave oven, I had one, and I was telling my kids that, yes, they can put food in the oven, but they don't have to watch it cook. So they could keep a distance, and then when it's finished, they can take it out.
Right.
And then
I remember, Annie, I took a meter in my home and I put a glass of water in the microwave oven and I turned it on. And that meter was in the red zone all the way through my kitchen, all the way through my hallway, all the way out to my front porch. And there was so much radiation coming off of that microwave oven that, and what do? We put our stuff in there and then we just sit there and wait for it to cook.
Especially kids, because I know as we put things in the oven when they're making cake on regular oven, they watch the cake cooking. So nevertheless, I was telling them not to do that. And then the next idea, great idea that the industry had, was to build up cell phones. And you put the source of microwaves of EMF fields and also electricity just close to your brain. So, of course, I mean, your brain is within the skull, so there is a bone, but a bone is not enough to protect completely the brain. So that's when the question started being asked in the 90s about a possible risk of brain tumors because of the cell phones. And that's when the IARC started a study. And at the same time, Ardell in Sweden, who is also a clinical epidemiologist, started one of the first studies to compare cases of brain tumors and controls, people without brain tumors. And he found out that the people who were getting brain tumors were the ones who had a cell phone, used it for the longest amount of time, but by the 1990 standard, so nothing compared to what it is nowadays. But already there, he found that they had an increased risk of tumors of the brain, which he published. And I think he was clever because he looked at something we should look at much more often, which was the age at which people started using a cell phone or a cordless phone, DCT, because that's more or less the same stuff. And if he was finding that the one who started using it early, by the 90 standards, meaning before the age of 20, had the highest risk.
Oh, let's peel that back for a second.
Yeah.
So this microwave radiation was developed as a warfare tool by our militaries. We then brought it
as a radar, so both for welfare, but I mean also to see for the planes you need radars.
Sure. So there was a purpose. They kept it in the military, and then they rolled it out commercially. So now we've got it commercially, and now we've had studies that have been done for decades that show the younger you hand a child a cell phone, the sooner you're going to start seeing the fallout. Right?
Yeah.
So there are groups here in the United States of parents who are working very hard. There's one called Wait Until 8th, telling parents, please wait until at least 8th grade to give your child a cell phone. And at that, you should never give a child a smartphone. Give them something that will allow them to text and make an emergency phone call. Everything else should be done on a computer when you're home or in your office, and just plug everything back in through Ethernet cables. You can buy the adapters to the devices, including the phones, and you just hardwire. You get a screaming fast signal. It's far more reliable. Your data's not buckshot out into the air to be hacked, and it's far more sustainable. Wired technology consumes 10 times less energy than wireless components. So many reasons, but as you said, the public just doesn't know. So now we have studies showing this causes cancer, and cancer is just the tip of the iceberg. I invite anybody who's interested in actually looking at the science to go out to my website at Massachusetts for Safe Technology, and on my resources page, you'll find the EMF Medical Conference. We can train our doctors, our dentists, our therapists, anybody in the healing arts, how to recognize, diagnose, treat, and most importantly, to Annie's point, prevent these illnesses from happening in the first place. And as you go down my resources page, you will also see I've got bullets by topics. You can look at the cancers, you can look at infertility, you can look at neurotoxicity, you can look at those military studies that have now been declassified, showing they knew decades ago that this existed. So, wow, Annie, I can't believe that you lived all of this. You know, I just got involved.
I lived through that, and then now I cannot stop, because even if the IRC did classify the EMF as a group 2B carcinogen, so a possible carcinogen, it's not very high up in the hierarchy, but that was based on what was officially available as of 2011, when the monograph had a meeting, and it got published then in 2013. And at that time, what was published could would not allow for a higher classification because, after all, the risk in epidemiological studies of adults was for the most heavy users. Mm-hmm. So just one group. But for me, it's exactly the group you are expecting. Who is going to get cancer first? The one who has been mostly exposed, so a longer duration of exposure, starting at a younger age, side on which he or she is usually holding the phone, ipsilateral tumors, to use the medical jargon, and for the temporal lobe, which is the part of the brain closest to the phone. So, it's not as if we had found one group somewhere in the middle having a high risk and nothing else. The fact that maybe you have to wait, it's always the case for cancer, you have to wait sufficient time, sufficient exposure before you get cancer. But when you get it, that's also something to remember. Among these brain tumors, there is glioblastoma. Glioblastoma is the most aggressive cancer one can get. It's really the one not to choose to have, because even if you have huge financial means, if you can be treated anywhere, the best hospital, by the best surgeon, the best chemotherapist, the best this and that and whatever, in the world, you are going to die from it. And in fact, one of the person I was working with, not only doing the science, but then disseminating knowledge, because I think scientists have to talk to people and they can train themselves also to be understood, especially epidemiology. I think it's easy to explain to people what it is. But to be cautious. So back in 2008, we had written an appeal which was published in a newspaper, in the general press, in the Sunday paper, because Sunday people have time to read, telling the people how to use the phone in the least dangerous way. I did that with David Servan-Schreiber, who is a name which is very well known in France, but also elsewhere. His books have been translated in languages. He was a physician, a doctor, just like my wife, training a PhD in the US, in Pittsburgh for him. So he knew what he was talking about, and he himself got a glioma. So first, benign form of a tumor, he was operated on, but then he got a second glioma years later, and in the end, he got a glioblastoma, and he died from his cancer. But he was someone with a name which could open many doors, so we had managed to have that appeal. The kind of things I see all over the place nowadays, but I guess would never see it enough, telling people not to use a cell phone, use the landline, text rather than talk, don't hold it close to your head, keep the conversation brief, don't use it in a car which is moving, etc. Everything was written down. Then we translated it into English, and it was sent to the US, and also it was distributed. But in a way, thinking that soon we're going to be in 2028, and we still have to repeat these things. Mm-hmm. So that, in a way, is very sad.
Yeah.
But it's understandable, because in front of us, we have industries who are making huge amounts of money, and because the technology is changing, not to become less dangerous, unfortunately, but to become much more powerful, to transmit huge amount of information, which of course you will need if you have an autonomous car who drives by yourself. Well, of course, it needs to be full of connections. And everything now can be connected. When I got connected, because I think they should be disconnected.
Right.
It's connected for invisible means. Your fridge telling you to buy eggs or whatever. We don't really need all of this.
Hey, can I
But-
show you something? So when you talk about everything in our house being connected through the Internet of Things, I've worked really hard to make my house a safe sanctuary. I don't have
Yeah.
any wireless in my house, but I couldn't figure out how to turn off the wireless antenna on my television. And I contacted the manufacturer, I looked at the manual, couldn't figure it out. So I literally picked up my big television and I put it in my car and I drove it down to the local tech guy in my town. And I said, Brendan, can you just open this thing up and take out the antenna for wireless? And so I paid him to do that. And this is the enemy. This is all it is. It's a little board that plugs into the motherboard, and then it radiates the heck out of us and our families. So it's not rocket science to fix this. We should defer to hardwired technology as often as we can. As Dr. Sasco says, keep your distance. Spend as little amount of time radiating yourself. And the third prong is, if you can't get away from it, work with a professional to learn how to shield, and folks can go out to the Building Biology Institute and get some instruction there. And, you know, it breaks my heart that you've been writing incredible pieces for the public since 2008, and here we are almost 20 years later. But at least with social media now, you know, we know mainstream media is run by these corporations that perpetuate all of this technology. So at least in social media, people are starting to figure this out a little bit more. And so for my part, I do a free public education webinar every month. Our next one is going to be on Wednesday, August 27th from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. And we will hold your hand. We'll walk you through the science, what the medical recommendations are, how to recognize the symptoms, and most importantly, baby steps that we can all take today to protect ourselves and our loved ones. And then we also have some nice resources when you want to take it out beyond your own home and start talking to your friends and neighbors and then your community, and try and keep those cell towers from getting installed literally in your front yard, which is what 5G is. It's putting a cell tower every 2 to 12 houses to maintain these crazy connections with everything that you own. So, Dr. Sasco, we have about 2 minutes left. So what do you recommend that viewers should do, and what gives you hope today?
What I recommend were things I already recommended years ago. Plus, of course, the fact that now you have ways and means to try to protect yourself. At least have a safe home. Try to have safe schools. And I know that there are lots of movements in that direction, especially in the US, but also in France, where they want to forbid kids to enter with their cell phone and leave it, but not on, off, preferably in a specific room at the entrance of the school and get it back. But so things are somewhat better, but no, I'm not very optimistic, because I think, unfortunately, since 2011, the time of the last monograph meeting, huge efforts have been made to produce negative studies. So now some scientists are spending their time reanalyzing all studies which were positive and saying, no, it's just because these old guys or women, whatever, didn't know what to do. Now we know much better. And in fact, they even now have produced, including IARC has produced, so I am not happy at all, textbook to recalibrate in a way the studies. So there is a huge effort at the level of WHO, at the level of IARC, with a push of the industry. I don't think they do it just by themselves, to say that after all, it's not that dangerous.
Yeah,
and the last example was 2 nights ago. I was supposed to have 2 minutes on TV for one of these local antennas, which is going to be huge, twice as big as a big tree, with 8 antennas, repetitors on it, so something huge, by 50 meters, so very close to a house of a woman who got really worried, contacted me. So in the event, we managed to convince the city or to vote against that. And I was supposed to say a word about health effects. And then the night before, the journalist called me up very late, and I said, I knew what he was going to say. He said, I'm sure that we have decided that we don't have time for your interview. I said, who decided? And he said that the authorities of that TV, and it's a big French network, public TV, doesn't want to discuss the health effects.
We see this happen all the time. I experience it firsthand. I've been interviewed a number of times by Boston journalists, and their executives warn them before they come out to meet with me, be very, very careful with what you report. Because either these networks are outright owned by the parent companies that also own the telecom industry, or their advertising revenue is so potent that it would be shooting themselves in the foot if they started saying, hey, wait, all this wireless tech is harmful. So that's why I'm so grateful for the opportunity to interview scientists like you, Annie, to get the truth out there, to provide resources, go out to Massachusetts for safe technology, take our little course at Safer Screen Time. Know it for yourself, and then you will feel empowered to have the courage to at least start taking baby steps to protect your sleeping area, your home, and your loved ones. So, Dr. Sasco, it is always such a pleasure to meet with you, and I'm so grateful for your life's work. Keep going. We need you here. And until next time.
What is going to happen is in the hands of the citizen. I think it's really for each person, in each population of the world, when they start understanding what the problem is, to act and try to convince the politicians, because they are the ones decided on regulations and laws.
I agree. There's no cavalry coming, and until the public learns, gets the courage, and speaks up, industry's just going to keep doing what they're doing, and they pour so much money into our politics. But we do have 6 bills here in Massachusetts. Right now, we're hoping to advance the smart meter utility opt-out bills. We've got a bill to protect the kids in schools. We've got a bill to put electromagnetic radiation syndrome in the state-level database that tracks diseases. We want to strengthen our civil rights, and we want to form a commission to get the right minds at the table at the state level and truly address this, as New Hampshire has already done. So we keep trying, and we're just so grateful to stand shoulder to shoulder with wonderful, wonderful scientists and doctors like yourself and your colleagues. And we just want to wish everybody a tech safe day. Reach out, let us know how we can help.